The German machine gun opened fire at precisely 1700 hours on June 6, 1918, its bullets sifting through the wheat field like an invisible reaper. Marine Private First Class Daniel Butler pressed his face into the French soil as rounds cracked overhead, tasting dirt and his own fear while chaos erupted around him in the golden grain. That should have been peaceful countryside. "Move, move, move," shouted Gunnery Sergeant Ernest Jansen, his voice cutting through the staccato hammering of Maxim guns and the screaming of wounded Marines. "We don't retreat, we reload." Butler scrambled forward with his Springfield rifle, following the hunched figures of his squad mates from Company A, 1st Battalion, 6th Marine Regiment. Ahead lay below wood 1,000 acres of dense forest that had once served as a hunting preserve for French nobility, but now bristled with German machine gun nests, rifle pits, and the veteran soldiers of the 237th Division. The 4th Marine Brigade had been rushed to the sector northwest of Château-Thierry as part of the desperate Allied effort to halt the German spring offensive that threatened to break through to Paris itself. After 4 years of stalemate, the Germans had launched their final gambit, a series of massive attacks designed to win the war, before American industrial might could tip the balance irrevocably toward the Allies. "Get that rifle up," Butler, Jansen barked as they reached the edge of the wheat field. "See that muzzle flash? Put some lead on it." Butler shouldered his Springfield and squeezed off a shot at the distant trees, knowing the range was extreme, but taking grim satisfaction in the crack of the rifle and the kick against his shoulder. Around him, the other Marines of the 4th Brigade were doing the same, laying down suppressive fire as they prepared for the assault that would either drive the Germans from Belleau Wood or leave Marine bodies scattered across the French countryside. Colonel Albertus Catlin, commanding the 6th Marine Regiment, stood on a small rise with his field glasses, watching his men advance through the grain. The big, cigar-smoking veteran of the Spanish-American War had been serving aboard the USS Maine when it exploded in Havana Harbor 20 years earlier, and his chest bore the Medal of Honor from fighting at Veracruz. He knew combat, knew Marines, and knew that what he was asking of them bordered on the impossible. "Sir," called his adjutant, Lieutenant Morrison, "French command reports the Germans have at least 3 full regiments entrenched in those woods. Machine gun positions every 50 yards, interconnected trenches, prepared fields of fire. Then we'll have to dig them out the hard way," Catlin replied, lowering his glasses as German artillery began to fall among his advancing Marines. These boys didn't come all the way from Paris Island to turn around at the first sign of trouble. The assault had been ordered by the French 21st Corps commander, who had gravely underestimated German strength in Belleau Wood and failed to provide adequate artillery preparation. What should have been a coordinated attack with massive fire support had devolved into a series of frontal assaults by Marines armed with rifles, bayonets, and the stubborn courage that would either save the day or get them all killed. According to the Marine Corps' Times analysis of the battle, at 1700 hours on June 6, 1918, the 4th Marine Brigade, comprising the 5th and 6th Marine Regiments and the 6th Machine Gun Battalion, attacked into the densely wooded former hunting preserve near the French village of Belleau to push back elements of the German 237th Division. Private Butler reached the tree line just as German defenders opened fire from prepared positions. Barely visible in the undergrowth, the forest erupted in muzzle flashes and the whine of ricocheting bullets, while Marines dove for whatever cover they could find among the ancient oaks and thick underbrush that had sheltered French aristocrats during peaceful hunting parties. Just 4 years earlier, taking fire from the left, someone screamed, and Butler saw Marines falling as German riflemen picked them off with methodical precision. These weren't the green conscripts the Allies had been fighting in recent months. These were veteran stormtroopers who knew their business and had turned every tree, every fold in the ground, into a killing position. Gunnery Sergeant Jansen appeared beside him, blood streaming from a graze across his forehead, but his eyes still burning with the intensity that had carried him through 2 decades of Marine Corps service. "Butler, take your fire team and work around that machine gun nest. We'll keep them busy from the front. Aye, Gunny," Butler called back, gathering the 3 Marines nearest to him, all kids from small American towns who had enlisted to fight the Hun and were now learning what war really meant in a French forest that had become a nightmare of steel and flame. By dawn on June 7th, the Marines had carved a precarious foothold in the southern edge of Belleau Wood, but the cost had been staggering. Companies that had advanced with full strength the previous evening now counted barely half their number, while German counterattacks throughout the night had tested every defensive position to its breaking point. Private Butler crouched in a shell crater beside what remained of his fire team, cleaning his Springfield with hands that trembled from exhaustion and adrenaline. Around him, the forest floor was littered with evidence of the previous day's carnage: abandoned equipment, spent shell casings, and the still forms of Marines who had given everything for a few hundred yards of blood-soaked French soil. "Movement to the front," whispered Corporal McKenna, the Irish immigrant who had become Butler's closest friend during the hellish ocean crossing aboard overcrowded transports. "Looks like Fritz is coming back for more." Through the morning mist, Butler could see German soldiers moving carefully through the trees, their distinctive helmets and field gray uniforms marking them as members of the same veteran units that had nearly broken through to Paris during the spring offensive. These weren't reluctant conscripts going through the motions. These were elite troops, determined to hold every inch of ground. The attack came with methodical German precision. Artillery shells began falling among the Marine positions, followed by the distinctive chatter of Maxim machine guns providing covering fire for advancing infantry. But this time, the Marines were ready. "Here they come," shouted Lieutenant Williams, the young officer who had taken command of Butler's company after Captain Henderson was killed in the first assault. "Make every shot count." Butler pressed his rifle stock against his shoulder and drew a bead on a German soldier advancing through the trees. The Springfield cracked, and the enemy soldier stumbled and fell. Butler worked the bolt and acquired another target, fell into the rhythm of aimed fire that had been drilled into him during weeks of training at Paris Island. Around him, the surviving Marines of the 4th Brigade were proving that American marksmanship could match German tactical skill. Many had grown up hunting in the forests of Virginia and the Carolinas, and they brought a deadly precision to their rifle work that began to tell on the advancing Germans. "They're calling us Teufelhunden," McKenna called out during a brief lull in the firing. "Devil dogs." "The prisoners we took yesterday said their officers warned them about the American Marines, who fight like devils." The nickname would stick, becoming part of Marine Corps' legend. But in the moment, Butler was too focused on survival to appreciate the historical significance. German artillery was falling closer to their positions, and word was spreading that Colonel Catlin had been badly wounded while directing the defense. By midday, the German attack had been repulsed, but at terrible cost to both sides. The Marines held their small piece of Belleau Wood, but German strength in the deeper forest remained largely intact. Intelligence reports suggested that the enemy had been reinforced during the night, bringing fresh units from the 10th, 197th, 87th, and 28th Divisions to supplement the 237th. "This isn't working," Butler overheard Lieutenant Williams telling Gunnery Sergeant Jansen. "We're feeding Marines into a meat grinder. The Germans have had for years to perfect their defensive tactics, and we're learning on the job. Then we'd better learn fast," Jansen replied grimly, "because retreat isn't in the Marine Corps' vocabulary." That afternoon, Major Benjamin Berry arrived with reinforcements from the 5th Marine Regiment and new orders. From brigade headquarters, the piecemeal attacks were to stop. Instead, the Marines would consolidate their positions and prepare for a coordinated assault with proper artillery support and clear tactical objectives. "Listen up, Marines," Berry addressed the survivors of the previous day's fighting. "We've bloodied Fritz's nose, but now it's time to knock him out. Intelligence says the Germans have turned this forest into a fortress with machine gun positions, covering every approach and prepared fields of fire that would make Napoleon weep with envy." He gestured toward the depths of Belleau Wood, where German positions remained largely intact despite 2 days of fighting. "But they've made one critical error. They think they're fighting the same kind of troops they've been grinding up for For years, they don't understand Marines. Butler felt a stirring of pride despite his exhaustion and fear. The Marines around him were kids from farms and factories, most seeing combat for the first time. But they had already proven they could stand up to veteran German troops in their own carefully prepared killing ground. "We're going to show them what American Marines can do," Major Barry continued, "not by charging into their machine guns like it's Gettysburg, but by using our heads as much as our rifles. We're going to outthink them, outmaneuver them, and outfight them until they're begging to surrender." The plan was ambitious, but tactically sound small unit attacks coordinated with artillery fire, using Marine marksmanship and mobility to neutralize German strong points one by one. It would be methodical, bloody work, but it offered hope of victory without catastrophic casualties. As evening fell over Belleau Wood, Butler cleaned his rifle one more time and tried to write a letter to his parents back in Ohio. The words wouldn't come. How could he explain what he had seen and done in the past 2 days? How could he describe the transformation from farm boy to Marine, from civilian to warrior? Instead, he simply wrote, "We are holding our ground. The Marines do not retreat." June 10th dawned with the peculiar quiet that experienced soldiers learned to distrust, the kind of silence that preceded either victory or catastrophe, with little middle ground between. Butler had spent the night in a shell crater that had become home for what remained of his fire team, listening to German voices drifting through the forest and wondering if they were planning another attack or preparing to retreat. "Chow time, Butler," McKenna whispered, passing him a can of cold beans and a chunk of hardtack that could have been used as building material, courtesy of the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, probably packed sometime during the Civil War. Butler accepted the meager ration gratefully, having learned that hot meals were a luxury in combat zones and that a Marine ate whenever food was available, regardless of temperature or palatability. Round them, other survivors of Company A were performing the same morning routine weapons maintenance, equipment checks, and the grim arithmetic of counting who had made it through another night. "Word from the lieutenant," said Sergeant Morrison, crawling up to their position with news from the command post. "We're moving out in 30 minutes. Orders are to advance by fire teams, using cover and concealment to work around German strong points. No more frontal assaults into machine gun nests." The new tactics reflected hard lessons learned during the previous 4 days of fighting. The Marines had discovered that German defensive positions in Belleau Wood were more sophisticated than anything they had encountered in training. Interconnected trenches, mutually supporting machine gun nests, and carefully planned kill zones that turned traditional infantry assaults into suicide missions. But the Marines had also learned that German defenders, despite their experience and preparation, could be outflanked and overwhelmed by small units using initiative and marksmanship. American industrial workers and farm boys might lack formal military training, but they possessed mechanical aptitude and individual initiative that proved devastating when applied to combat operations. "Butler, your team takes the left flank," Morrison continued. "There's a machine gun nest about 200 yards ahead, positioned to cover the main trail. Intelligence thinks there's a way around it through that ravine we spotted yesterday." Butler nodded, checking his Springfield one more time before signaling to his fire team. McKenna carried a Browning automatic rifle that provided mobile firepower, while Private Johnson from Mississippi had proven himself deadly accurate with rifle grenades. Private Kowalski, a Polish immigrant from Detroit, served as their scout, using skills learned hunting in the Michigan forests to navigate the treacherous terrain. The advance began with methodical precision, each fire team moving carefully through the forest while maintaining visual contact with adjacent units. Butler's team worked their way toward the ravine Morrison had indicated, using every fold in the ground and every tree trunk for cover as German sentries scanned the forest for movement. The machine gun nest they had been assigned to neutralize was a masterpiece of German engineering, logs and earth providing overhead protection, carefully cleared fields of fire, and ammunition supplies positioned for sustained defense. 2 soldiers manned the Maxim gun, while others provided rifle support from flanking positions. "I can get close enough for a rifle grenade," Johnson whispered as they studied the position from concealment 50 yards away. "But I'll need covering fire to make it work." Butler considered the tactical situation, remembering his training at Paris Island, but adapting it to the reality of combat. "McKenna, when I give the signal, put a magazine from the BAR into those rifle pits on the right. Johnson, wait until they're ducking from McKenna's fire. Then put your grenade right into the gun position. Kowalski and I will provide additional covering fire." The attack unfolded with clockwork precision. McKenna's bar chattered, sending 20 rounds of 30-06 ammunition into the German positions. Johnson's rifle grenade exploded directly inside the machine gun nest, while Butler and Kowalski picked off German soldiers trying to escape the destruction. Within minutes, the strong point that had held up Marine advances for 2 days was silent, its defenders dead or fled deeper into the forest. Similar small unit actions were taking place throughout Belleau as Marines applied the new tactics with deadly effectiveness, moving to the next objective. Butler reported, "When Lieutenant Williams reached their position, estimate enemy casualties at 6 to 8. No Marine losses." Williams nodded approvingly, but his expression remained grim. "Good work, but we're just getting started. Intelligence counts at least 50 more positions like this one between here and the far edge of the wood. It's going to be a long day." By late afternoon, Butler's fire team had neutralized for more German positions, working methodically through the forest with the kind of patient, deadly efficiency that would become legendary in Marine Corps' history. The cost in ammunition was enormous. Each engagement required hundreds of rounds to suppress German defenders while positioning for the final assault, but casualties remained manageable compared to the frontal attacks of previous days. "Fritz is learning, too," McKenna observed as they prepared for their 5th attack of the day. "That last position had better camouflage, better interlocking fields of fire. They're adapting to our tactics." Butler nodded, recognizing the truth in his friend's observation. The Germans were professional soldiers with years of combat experience, and they were adjusting their defensive positions to counter Marine small unit tactics. The battle was becoming a deadly chess match between experienced German defenders and increasingly skilled American attackers. As evening approached, word filtered through the Marine positions that Major Barry had been wounded and evacuated, replaced by another officer who would have to learn the lessons of Belleau through direct experience. The grinding battle of attrition continued, with each small victory purchased at the cost of irreplaceable men and finite supplies. Dawn on June 15th found Butler's fire team occupying a German trench they had taken during the night, surrounded by the debris of battle that marked their progress through Belleau. Abandoned equipment, shell craters, and hastily dug graves testified to the savage fighting that had consumed both armies. For over a week, the trench itself was a testament to German engineering skill deep enough to provide protection from artillery, wide enough for 2 men to pass, and equipped with firing steps, ammunition storage, and drainage systems that kept it functional despite rain and shell fire. Butler examined the construction with professional interest, noting techniques that American forces could adapt for their own defensive positions. They knew their business, McKenna admitted grudgingly, exploring a communication trench that connected their position to a network of similar fortifications. 4 years of practice building these things, and it shows in every detail. But German engineering excellence hadn't been enough to stop determined Marines, willing to pay the price for victory. Throughout Belleau, American forces had systematically reduced enemy positions through coordinated small unit attacks that combined individual initiative with tactical discipline. The results spoke for themselves. Nearly half the forest now lay under Marine control. "Orders from regiment," announced Sergeant Morrison, appearing at the trench line with dispatches from higher headquarters. "We're to consolidate our positions and prepare for a major German counterattack. Intelligence indicates Fritz is bringing up reserves from the 28th Division to try and push us back." Butler nodded, checking his ammunition supply and noting that his Springfield had developed a slight wobble. In the bold action, a sign of wear that concerned him, but not enough to request replacement. Every rifle was precious in the current Tactical situation, and armorers were too busy repairing combat damage to worry about minor mechanical issues. The counterattack came at midday with typical German thoroughness. Artillery preparation lasted 30 minutes, pounding Marine positions with high explosive shells that carved new craters in soil, already torn by previous bombardments. Then came the infantry veteran troops advancing with the methodical precision that had characterized German operations throughout the war. "Here they come," Butler called to his fire team as field gray uniforms appeared through the forest. "Same drill as before, pick your targets and make every shot count." But this attack was different from previous German efforts. Instead of the frontal assaults that had marked earlier fighting, enemy forces were using infiltration tactics, small groups working through the forest to probe for weak points in Marine defensive lines. It was a more sophisticated approach that reflected German adaptation to Marine fighting methods. "Movement on the left flank," reported Private Johnson, his Mississippi drawl calm despite the circumstances. "Looks like a full squad trying to work around our position." Butler considered the tactical situation, recognizing that his fire team was in danger of being surrounded if German infiltration succeeded. The enemy was using the same small unit tactics that had proven so effective for Marine attacks, turning American innovation against the innovators themselves. "McKenna, Johnson, you hold the front. Kowalski and I will deal with the flanking movement." Butler grabbed extra ammunition and his bayonet, preparing for the kind of close-quarters combat that had become commonplace in the dense forest. "If we don't come back in 20 minutes, fall back to the next trench line." The pursuit through Belleau wood took them deeper into German-held territory than any Marine had penetrated during previous operations. Butler found himself moving through forest so thick that visibility was measured in yards, rather than hundreds of yards, where every tree might conceal an enemy soldier and every shadow might hide. The contact came suddenly, a German soldier, rising from concealment barely 10 feet away, rifle aimed directly at Butler's chest. Time slowed to a crawl as both men recognized the situation and reacted with trained reflexes. Butler's bayonet thrust caught the German in the chest just as the enemy rifle fired, the bullet passing close enough to tear fabric from his uniform sleeve. "Behind you," Kowalski shouted, his own rifle barking as another German soldier appeared from a different direction. Butler spun and fired from the hip, working his bold action with mechanical efficiency while his mind processed tactical information. At superhuman speed. The firefight lasted perhaps 30 seconds, but felt like an eternity. When it ended, 4 German soldiers lay dead while Butler and Kowalski remained standing, breathing hard and checking themselves for wounds they might not have noticed. During the adrenaline rush of combat, "We need to get back," Kowalski said, his voice shaky despite his outward calm. "There'll be more coming, and we're too far from support." The withdrawal to their original position took another 20 minutes of careful movement through hostile territory, but they arrived to find McKenna and Johnson had successfully held their sector. Against repeated German probes, the counterattack had been defeated, but at significant cost to both sides. Casualty reports coming in. Sergeant Morrison informed them as evening approached. "Regiment estimates German losses at over 100, but we've taken our share of hits too. Companies that started this fight with full strength are down to platoon size." Butler nodded grimly, understanding the mathematics of attrition that governed modern warfare. Every victory came at a price measured in American lives, and the bill was accumulating faster than replacements could arrive. From training camps in the United States, that night, as he cleaned his rifle and tried to write another letter home, Butler reflected on the changes that Belleau would have wrought in himself and his fellow Marines. They had entered the forest as trained soldiers. They were emerging as combat veterans, whose skills had been honed by the most demanding teacher of all survival under fire. June 20th arrived with the kind of gray, drizzling rain that turned the battlefield into a sea of mud and misery, making every movement an effort and every piece of equipment heavier than it should have been. Butler had spent the night in a waterlogged shell hole, shivering despite his wool uniform and wondering if the dampness in his lungs was just from the weather or the first signs of the gas poisoning that had claimed so many Marines during recent German attacks. The 4th Marine Brigade had been fighting continuously for 2 weeks, and the strain was showing in every face, every movement, every decision made by exhausted men pushed beyond normal human endurance. Companies had been reduced to squad strength, while squads often counted fewer men than a normal fire team. Yet still they held their positions in Belleau Wood, refusing to yield ground that had been purchased with Marine blood. Word from battalion. Sergeant Morrison reported, his voice hoarse from breathing powder smoke and shouting orders over artillery bombardments. We're to prepare for one final push to clear the remaining German positions. Intelligence estimates they've got maybe 200 effective fighters left in the entire wood. Butler looked around at his own fire team, noting that only he and McKenna remained from the original for Marines, who had entered Belleau Wood 14 days earlier. Johnson had been evacuated with a severe leg wound, while Kowalski lay buried in the makeshift cemetery that marked their first night's fighting. Replacements had arrived. Farm boys and factory workers rushed through abbreviated training and shipped overseas to feed the insatiable appetite of modern warfare. This is it, boys, announced Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Wise, who had assumed command of the 2nd Battalion after Colonel Catlin's evacuation. The veteran officer looked as exhausted as his men, but his voice still carried the authority that had brought him through 20 years of Marine Corps service. We finish what we started, or we don't go home at all. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, a coordinated attack by all remaining Marine forces, supported by French artillery and preceded by a gas bombardment designed to force German defenders out of their protective positions. It would be the largest American operation since the battle began, representing the accumulated tactical knowledge purchased with Marine casualties. Butler strapped on his gas mask and checked his Springfield one final time, noting that the rifle had acquired the kind of smooth action that came from hard use under combat conditions. The weapon had become an extension of himself during the past 2 weeks, as familiar as his own hands and twice as deadly when applied with proper technique. Remember your training, McKenna said, adjusting his own equipment with movements that had become automatic through repetition. Advance by bounds, use cover and concealment. Support your fire team partners, same as we've been doing, just bigger. The gas bombardment began at 0800 hours. French artillery lobbing shells filled with phosgene and chlorine gas into known German positions throughout the forest. Within minutes, the wind carried the distinctive odor of chemical weapons toward Marine positions, along with the sounds of German soldiers abandoning their trenches to escape the poisonous clouds. Gas clear, came the call from forward observers, and the Marine attack began with the disciplined precision that had characterized their operations since the early disasters of June 6th. Fire teams advanced through the forest in coordinated bounds, using lessons learned through 2 weeks of continuous combat to avoid German kill zones, while maintaining pressure on remaining enemy positions. Butler's team was assigned to clear a complex of interconnected trenches near the northern edge of Belleau Wood positions that had anchored German defenses since the battle began. Intelligence suggested the trenches were held by elements of the 28th Division, veteran troops who had been rushed to Belleau Wood as reinforcements when Marine attacks threatened to break through German lines. The approach required 30 minutes of careful movement through terrain that had been fought over repeatedly, marked by shell craters, abandoned equipment, and the hastily covered graves that marked previous engagements. Butler used every technique learned during his brief but intensive combat education, moving from cover to cover while maintaining visual contact with adjacent fire teams. The German trench system was more elaborate than anything they had previously encountered. Deep excavations, connected by communication trenches, with prepared positions for machine guns and mortars. But the gas attack had done its work, forcing defenders out of their protected positions and disrupting the coordination that made such defensive systems effective. Grenades first, then follow up with rifles. Butler instructed his team as they prepared for the final assault. Remember, they're as tired and scared as we are, but they're also trapped. Desperate men fight harder. The attack unfolded with brutal efficiency. Hand grenades exploded in German positions, followed by Marines advancing with fixed bayonets and deadly accurate rifle fire. The fighting was close quarters and personal, decided by individual courage and small unit tactics rather than grand strategy or overwhelming numbers, according to analysis published by the Washington Post. Marine officers with the 2nd Battalion, 6th Regiment after the Battle of Belleau would demonstrated the kind of small unit leadership that became legendary in Marine Corps' history, with junior officers and non-commissioned officers making tactical decisions that determine the outcome of individual engagements. When the firing stopped, Butler found himself standing in a German trench surrounded by the debris of battle and the evidence of American victory. The remaining defenders had either fled deeper into the forest or surrendered to Marines, who had proven themselves masters of this new style of warfare. Sector clear, he reported when Lieutenant Williams reached his position. Estimate enemy casualties at 20 to 30. For prisoners taken, no Marine losses in my fire team. Williams nodded approvingly, but his expression remained cautious. Good work. But we're not done yet. There are still pockets of resistance throughout the wood, and Fritz hasn't given up completely. Stay alert and be ready to repel counterattacks. June 25th, dawn clear and cold, with the kind of crystalline air that made distant objects seem close enough to touch, and revealed the full scope of destruction that 3 weeks of continuous combat had visited upon Belleau Wood. Butler stood in what had been the German command bunker just 24 hours earlier, studying maps captured from enemy officers and trying to comprehend the scale of the battle. He had helped to win. The maps told a story of systematic German preparation and methodical Marine reduction of enemy positions. Every trench, every machine gun nest, every observation post had been marked by German engineers and then crossed out in American pencil. As Marine fire teams eliminated them one by one, the process had taken nearly 3 weeks of continuous fighting, but the results spoke for themselves. Belleau Wood was now firmly under American control. Final casualty reports from regiment, announced Sergeant Morrison, his voice carrying the exhaustion of 3 weeks under fire, but also a note of pride that hadn't been there at the beginning of the battle. Total Marine casualties 1,811. German casualties estimated at over 3,000, plus 800 prisoners taken. Butler absorbed the numbers with the kind of detached calculation that combat veterans developed when dealing with statistics that represented friends, enemies, and fellow Marines who would never see home again. The mathematics of modern warfare were brutal, but undeniable victory went to the force that could sustain losses while continuing to function as a military organization. Around him, the survivors of the 4th Marine Brigade were performing the tasks that marked the end of major combat operations, collecting abandoned equipment, processing prisoners, establishing security positions, and beginning the slow process of recovery that would eventually restore them to fighting effectiveness. Many would be evacuated for medical treatment, while others would remain to garrison the territory they had conquered. Orders from Division Lieutenant Williams announced, as he gathered the surviving officers and senior non-commissioned officers. We're to hold Belleau Wood against any German counterattacks, while Corps brings up regular Army units to take over defensive responsibilities. Our job is done, but we maintain positions until properly relieved. The final German attack came that afternoon, launched by elements of the 10th and 197th Divisions in a desperate attempt to reclaim at least part of the forest that had cost both sides so dearly. It was a half-hearted effort by troops whose morale had been shattered by 3 weeks of unsuccessful resistance against Marines who seemed to possess supernatural fighting ability. Butler's fire team, now consisting entirely of replacement personnel, except for McKenna and himself, occupied positions along what had been the German main line of resistance when the battle began. The irony wasn't lost on him. Marines were now defending German trenches against German attacks, using enemy engineering skill to protect American lives. Here they come, McKenna called, pointing toward movement in the forest beyond their perimeter. Looks like company strength, maybe less. They're not moving with much enthusiasm. The final engagement lasted less than 30 minutes. German attacks lacked the coordination and intensity that had characterized earlier operations, while Marine defensive fire demonstrated the kind of professional competence That marked veteran units. When the shooting stopped, German forces were in full retreat toward their own lines, leaving behind equipment and wounded that testified to their shattered morale. "That's it," Williams announced as reports came in from all sectors. "German resistance has collapsed. Belleau Wood is officially cleared of enemy forces." The words marked the end of the first major American victory on the Western Front, but Butler felt no sense of triumph, only exhaustion and relief that he had survived what historians would later recognize as one of the most brutal battles in Marine Corps history. The forest around them bore scars that would last for generations, while the men who had fought there carried invisible wounds that would never fully heal. That evening, as Marine patrols swept the forest one final time to ensure no German stragglers remained, Butler found himself walking through sections of Belleau Wood that had been fought over repeatedly. During the 3-week battle, every clearing, every ridge, every stream crossing held memories of Marines who had given their lives to secure this piece of French real estate. "Think it was worth it?" McKenna asked as they paused beside a makeshift cross marking the grave of Private Johnson, killed during the fighting 3 days earlier. Butler considered the question seriously, understanding that his answer would define how he remembered not just the Battle of Belleau Wood, but his entire experience as a Marine in the Great War. The cost had been enormous, nearly 2,000 Marine casualties for a piece of forest that measured barely for square miles. But the results extended far beyond simple territorial conquest. "We proved something here," he said finally. "Proved that American Marines could stand up to the best troops Germany could throw at us. Proved that all the training and discipline meant something when the shooting started. Proved that the Marine Corps belongs on any battlefield in the world." As if summoned by his words, a dispatch rider appeared with orders from Corps headquarters. Butler read the message twice before fully comprehending its significance. "The 4th Marine Brigade is hereby commended for exceptional gallantry in action against enemy forces at Belleau Wood. By order of the French 6th Army, Belleau Wood shall henceforth be known as Bois de la Brigade de Marine in honor of the Marines who conquered it." The honor was unprecedented. Never before had the French Army renamed a battlefield in honor of 4 ign troops. But then again, Butler reflected, never before had American Marines fought with such distinction on European soil. 3 months after the guns fell silent in Belleau Wood, Private First Class Daniel Butler stood at attention in a formation that bore little resemblance to the 4th Marine Brigade that had entered the forest in early June. Fresh-faced replacements filled the ranks where veteran Marines had once stood, while the survivors of those 3 weeks of hell carried themselves with the quiet confidence that marked combat veterans in any era. The ceremony was taking place in the town square of Château-Thierry, with French civilians gathering to honor the American Marines who had helped save their country from German conquest. But Butler's attention was focused on the words being read by Brigadier General James Harbord, who had assumed command of the Marine Brigade during the final stages of the battle. "The 4th Marine Brigade," Harbord announced to the assembled formation, "has brought honor to the Marine Corps, to the American Expeditionary Forces, and to the United States of America through its conduct during the Battle of Belleau Wood. Your courage under fire, your tactical skill, and your refusal to retreat in the face of overwhelming odds have established a standard of excellence that will inspire Marines for generations to come." Butler felt the weight of those words, understanding that he and his fellow survivors had become part of something larger than themselves. The Battle of Belleau Wood had transformed the Marine Corps from a small naval infantry force into an elite fighting organization whose reputation would carry them through future conflicts on battlefields not yet imagined. The French had already taken the unprecedented step of awarding the Croix de Guerre to the entire 4th Marine Brigade, the first time in French military history that an entire foreign unit had received such recognition. Individual Marines had been decorated for specific acts of valor, but the collective honor spoke to the remarkable fighting qualities displayed by American forces. During their first major engagement on the Western Front, the German Army, Harbord continued, gave you a nickname during the fighting at Belleau Wood. They called you Teufelhunden, devil dogs, in recognition of your fighting spirit and tactical skill. That nickname has been earned through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Wear it with pride." Butler smiled slightly at the reference to the German nickname, remembering the first time he had heard it from captured prisoners who spoke of American Marines. With a mixture of respect and fear, the enemy had expected to face Green American, troops who would break under pressure. Instead, they had encountered Marines who fought with a combination of individual initiative and unit discipline that German forces had never previously experienced. The transformation hadn't been limited to enemy perceptions. The Marines themselves had changed during those 3 weeks of continuous combat, evolving from well-trained peacetime soldiers into battle-hardened veterans who understood that victory required more than courage. It demanded professional competence, tactical innovation, and the kind of unit cohesion that could only be forged under fire.